They called me the coffee girl for 3 years. But that day, I opened the merger files and silenced the entire boardroom. My name wasn't on the speaking list, but after the meeting, everyone followed my orders. My name is Alyssa Duvall, and for the past 3 years, I've been living a double life, to the world. I'm the founder and CEO of Duvall Equity Partners, a private investment firm with assets exceeding $3 billion. But to the employees and executives at Trident Core Holdings, the company my grandfather built and my father nearly destroyed, I'm just Lisa Drew, the unremarkable executive assistant who brings coffee, takes notes, and fades into the background. That was exactly how I wanted it. 3 years of carefully calculated invisibility, 3 years of "thank you, Lisa," without eye contact, 3 years of being talked over, dismissed, and underestimated by men in suits who never bothered to look past my purposefully plain appearance. 3 years of gathering evidence, building alliances, and patiently setting my trap. Today was the day it would finally snap shut. I stood in the executive kitchen of Trident's downtown headquarters, watching the specialty coffee machine hiss and steam as it prepared the precise beverages for each board member. I knew all their preferences by heart: Nathan's double espresso with a splash of almond milk, my father Gordon's black coffee with 1 sugar, Philip Warren's cappuccino with extra foam, Victoria Chen's green tea with honey. Little details matter when you're playing the long game. The meeting was scheduled for 9, and they were all gathering in the walnut-paneled boardroom with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the same room where, 7 years ago, my father and brother had systematically dismantled every idea I'd proposed, laughed at my concerns about company finances, and ultimately forced me out of my rightful position, the same room where my father had patted my shoulder and said, "Alyssa, business isn't for everyone. Perhaps something in the charitable foundation would suit you better." I checked my watch. 8:45. The representatives from North River Industries would be arriving soon. I smiled at my reflection in the gleaming chrome of the coffee machine. North River Industries didn't exist 3 months ago. Now it was about to become the most important company no one had ever heard of. I arranged the drinks on a silver tray, added a plate of fresh pastries from the artisan bakery down the street, and made my way to the boardroom. Through the glass walls, I could see them all inside 12 men and 2 women, the power brokers of Trident Core Holdings. My father sat at the head of the table despite his supposed semi-retirement, while my brother Nathan sat to his right, already holding court. I pushed the door open with my hip and entered with a practiced smile. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice pleasant and forgettable. "Coffee and refreshments." Nathan barely glanced up as I set his espresso beside him. "Thanks, Lisa. Could you make sure the North River people have the right presentation packet when they arrive? The special one with the updated projections." "Of course, Mr. Duvall," I replied, knowing exactly which updated projections he meant, the falsified numbers he'd prepared to make Trident look far more profitable than it actually was. I'd found those files months ago, along with the real numbers he was hiding. I moved around the table, distributing beverages and collecting murmured thanks from people whose eyes never left their phones or tablets. Only Victoria Chen, the head of product development, actually looked at me and smiled. "Thank you, Lisa. How's your aunt doing? Better, I hope?" "Much better. Thank you for asking," I replied, touched by her small kindness. Victoria was one of the few executives I might spare in the coming bloodbath. I had no quarrel with those who'd simply been doing their jobs. My father didn't acknowledge me at all when I placed his coffee beside him. He was deep in conversation with Lawrence Bishop, the company's legal counsel, about golf handicaps and summer homes in the Hamptons. I lingered a moment, refilling water glasses and straightening chairs, all while catching snippets of conversation. "Confident we can structure this merger to maximize shareholder value while minimizing tax implications," Bishop was saying, his voice oily with self-importance. Nathan leaned forward. "Once we control North River's distribution network, we can start shifting the pension obligations off our books. It's all perfectly legal as long as we maintain the shell company structure." I moved to the sideboard and began organizing materials, my back to the room, but my ears finely tuned. "What about the SEC concerns?" asked Philip Warren, the risk-averse CFO who'd replaced me after my ouster. "Don't worry about the SEC," Nathan replied with a dismissive wave. "By the time they figure out what we've done, the money will be where they can't touch it. Besides, Dad's golf buddy just got appointed to the commission. We're covered. I felt a familiar rush of cold anger, but kept my face neutral. Every word they spoke was being recorded by the small device disguised as a pen in my jacket pocket, another piece of evidence for the case I'd been building. At precisely 8:55, the boardroom door opened, and my executive assistant, my real executive assistant from Duval Equity Partners, stepped in. "Excuse me," she said with professional crispness. "The North River Industries representatives have arrived." Nathan straightened his tie and stood. "Excellent. Send them in, please." I moved to a corner of the room, taking my usual position near the coffee service, notepad in hand, as if ready to take minutes. No one asked me to leave. No one ever did. I was furniture to them, useful but unnoticed. Through the glass walls, I watched as 3 people approached 2 men and a woman, all in impeccable suits. I recognized them, of course. Morgan Chen, my chief legal counsel, David Washington, my head of operations, and Rebecca Torres, my chief financial officer, all senior executives at Duval Equity Partners, and all completely unknown to anyone at Trident. My father stood to greet them, extending his hand to Morgan, obviously assuming he was in charge. "Gordon Duval, welcome to Trident. I understand you're interested in a potential merger." Morgan smiled politely, but didn't take my father's hand. Instead, he gestured to the leather portfolio he carried. "We're here to discuss the merger. Yes, but perhaps not in the way you're expecting." Nathan frowned, his practiced smile faltering. "I'm sorry. I don't understand. We received your company's proposal last month. The terms seemed agreeable." "The terms have changed," Rebecca said coolly. "We have new documents for everyone to review." The tension in the room notched higher. This wasn't following the script Nathan had prepared. "Perhaps we could get some introductions first," my father suggested, trying to regain control of the situation. "Of course," Morgan replied. "My name is Morgan Chen, Chief Legal Officer for Duval Equity Partners. This is Rebecca Torres, CFO, and David Washington, COO." A confused murmur rippled through the room. Lawrence Bishop, the Trident legal counsel, stood up abruptly. "There must be some mistake. We've been negotiating with North River Industries." North River Industries is a wholly owned subsidiary of Duval Equity Partners, David explained, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the room, "and has been since its incorporation 3 months ago." Nathan's face flushed red. "What the hell is going on here? This wasn't the arrangement." "Your arrangement," Rebecca said pointedly, "was with a shell company that doesn't actually exist beyond some paperwork. The real negotiation begins now." My father's eyes narrowed. "Duval Equity Partners, I've never heard of it." "You wouldn't have," Morgan replied. "We've kept a deliberately low profile, but our CEO has been very interested in Trident Core Holdings for quite some time." "And where is this mysterious CEO?" Nathan demanded, his voice rising. "If they want to discuss a merger, they should have the courtesy to show up in person." Morgan smiled, and I knew that was my cue. I removed my glasses and unpinned my hair, letting it fall around my shoulders. Then I stepped forward from my corner. "I've been here all along." "Nathan," I said, my voice no longer the soft, deferential tone of Lisa Drew, but the commanding presence of Alyssa Duval, CEO. "For 3 years, actually." The room fell completely silent. 14 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me in shock and confusion. My father's face went pale. Nathan's mouth actually hung open. "Lisa," Victoria Chen was the first to speak. "What is this?" "My name isn't Lisa Drew," I said, moving to stand at the opposite end of the table from my father. "It's Alyssa Duval. I'm the founder and CEO of Duval Equity Partners, and as of this morning, I own a controlling interest in Trident Core Holdings." Nathan laughed, but it was a hollow, uncertain sound. "That's impossible. You can't." 54%, I cut him off. "That's how much of Trident I now control through various holdings and proxy agreements, more than enough to make decisions about the company's future." "You're bluffing," my father said, finding his voice at last. "This is some kind of stunt." Morgan stepped forward and began distributing thick folders to everyone at the table. These documents verify Ms. Duval's claims and outline the evidence gathered over the past 3 years regarding financial irregularities at Trident. I watched their faces as they opened the folders. Confusion gave way to shock, then fear as they began to understand what they were seeing. Page 1 shows the shell companies Nathan created to hide Trident's debt, nearly $340 million. That doesn't appear on any official balance sheet, I explained, my voice steady. Page 3 details how pension funds were systematically diverted to cover operating losses. Page 7 outlines the kickback scheme involving no-bid contracts to companies owned by Nathan's college friends. "This is slander," Nathan sputtered, but his face had gone from red to ashen. "These are lies." "Everything in that folder has been verified by 3 independent forensic accounting firms," Rebecca added. "The SEC has already received copies this morning." My father stared at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. "Alyssa, what have you done?" "What you should have done years ago." "Dad," I replied evenly. "Protected the company, protected the employees whose retirements were stolen, protected the legacy your father built." I moved around the table slowly, watching as board members frantically flipped through the documents, whispering urgently to each other. 7 years ago, I came to this same room with evidence that Nathan was embezzling from the company. I reminded them, locking eyes with each board member in turn. You all laughed me out of the room, called me paranoid, said I was trying to undermine my brother out of jealousy. I stopped beside my father's chair. You told me I didn't understand business, Dad, that I was too emotional to lead. So instead of fighting a battle I couldn't win, I created my own company, built it from nothing into something that could swallow Trident whole. "Why the charade?" Victoria asked, gesturing to my transformed appearance. "Why work as an assistant for 3 years?" "Because I needed to see it all from the inside," I explained. "Every falsified report, every illicit transfer, every cover-up, and I needed allies inside the company." I nodded to Victoria. "People like you, who still believed in doing things the right way." Nathan slammed his hand on the table. "This is a hostile takeover. It's completely legal," Morgan finished for him. "Unlike most of what you've been doing for the past decade, Nathan." "The merger documents on page 20 outline the path forward," I continued, returning to my position at the end of the table. "Trident will be restructured under Duval Equity Partners management. The pension funds will be restored with interest. The shell companies will be dissolved, and all debt will be properly accounted for." I looked directly at my brother. "Nathan Duval will resign as CFO effective immediately and will cooperate fully with all investigations, or face criminal charges for securities fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion." "You can't do this," he whispered, his arrogance finally crumbling. "I already have," I replied. "In fact, there are federal agents waiting in the lobby right now with a warrant for your arrest. The only question is whether you leave in handcuffs or walk out with some dignity intact." The room erupted in chaos. Board members shouting questions, my father demanding explanations, Nathan threatening lawsuits. I stood silent at the head of the table, watching it all unfold exactly as I had planned. After a few moments, I held up my hand, and to my satisfaction, the room gradually fell silent. "I understand this is a shock," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But the evidence is irrefutable. The company has been systematically looted from within for years. You all have a choice to make right now. You can either be part of the solution, or you can be removed along with those who caused the problem." I nodded to Rebecca, who distributed another set of documents. "These are individual agreements for each board member. Those who sign will be granted immunity from prosecution in exchange for your cooperation with the investigation. Those who don't..." I let the implication hang in the air. "This is blackmail," Lawrence Bishop hissed, his legal mind already calculating his personal liability. "This is accountability," I corrected him, "something that's been sorely lacking at Trident for a very long time." One by one, the board members began to sign the agreements, their earlier bravado replaced by grim resignation. Nathan sat frozen in his chair, staring at nothing, the ruins of his schemes crashing down around him. My father was the last to pick up his pen. He looked at me with eyes I barely recognized, uncertain, almost afraid. "Why didn't you come to me?" he asked quietly. "I would have listened." I did come to you, I reminded him. Multiple times. You chose Nathan every time. He signed the document slowly, then pushed it across the table toward me. What happens now? Now, I said, gathering the signed agreements. We begin the work of saving this company. I nodded to David, who opened the boardroom door. 2 men in dark suits entered FBI agents from the white-collar crime division. Nathan Duval, one of them said, we need you to come with us. Nathan looked desperately around the room, finding no allies. Even our father averted his eyes. Finally, defeated. He stood and allowed the agents to escort him out. As the door closed behind them, I addressed the remaining board members. This meeting is adjourned until tomorrow at 9. At that time, I'll introduce the new executive team and outline the restructuring plan. Until then, I suggest you all review the materials you've been given and prepare your questions. They filed out silently, avoiding eye contact with each other and with me. Victoria paused at the door. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I always thought you were too smart to be just an assistant. I smiled. Thank you, Victoria. I hope you'll consider staying on. We'll need good people. Soon. Only my father and I remained in the vast boardroom. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air between us. All of this, he gestured vaguely at the documents, just to prove me wrong. This wasn't about proving you wrong, Dad, I said, suddenly tired. It was about doing what's right. What you taught me was right, before Nathan convinced you that profit margins were more important than people. He aged before my eyes, the proud, intimidating figure of my childhood, suddenly an old man burdened by his mistakes. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, he said finally. I gathered my things and headed for the door. I stopped needing your forgiveness a long time ago. What I needed was for you to believe in me. Now I just need you to understand why I did this. I paused at the threshold, looking back at him sitting alone at the head of the empty table. The company announcement goes out at noon, I said. Your resignation as chairman will be accepted with gratitude for your years of service. Your reputation will remain intact. That's the best I can do. As I walked out of the boardroom, I finally felt the weight of the past 7 years lifting from my shoulders. The path ahead would be difficult restructuring a company as large as Trident, while dealing with the legal fallout of Nathan's crimes wouldn't be easy, but for the first time since I'd been forced out, I felt like I could breathe again. My team was waiting in the executive conference room down the hall. Morgan, Rebecca, and David, the people who had believed in me when no one else would. It's done, I told them, closing the door behind me. Phase 1, at least. How did it feel? Rebecca asked, pouring me a glass of water. I considered the question. Like justice? Long overdue. David checked his phone. The SEC has suspended trading of Trident stock pending their investigation. The press release is ready to go at noon, as planned. Nathan's been taken into custody, Morgan added. My contact at the FBI says he's already asking about a deal. Let him talk, I said, taking a seat at the table. The more he reveals, the easier our job will be. I looked around at these 3 people who had stood by me, who had helped me build Duval equity from nothing while simultaneously planning this day. Thank you, I said simply. I couldn't have done this without you. What about your father? Morgan asked carefully. I sighed. He's still processing. I don't think he'll fight us. But he won't be an ally either. And the board? They'll fall in line, I predicted. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. So, David said with a small smile, does this mean we can finally stop calling you Lisa? I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. God, yes, Lisa Drew can retire permanently. We spent the next several hours planning our approach for the coming days. The press strategy, the employee communications, the meetings with major clients and partners. By noon, the official announcement went out. Trident Core Holdings had been acquired by Duval Equity Partners in a merger that would strengthen both companies and ensure long-term stability and growth. The press release made no mention of the federal investigation or Nathan's arrest, but financial reporters would discover those details soon enough. At 2 o'clock, I stood in the company auditorium facing hundreds of confused and anxious Trident employees. Many of them knew me only as Lisa, the quiet assistant who brought coffee to meetings, The murmurs and whispers rippled through the crowd as I took the stage. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice amplified by the microphone. "My name is Alyssa Duvall. Until today, most of you knew me as Lisa Drew. I want to explain why I've been working among you under a different identity, and more importantly, what changes are coming to Trident." For the next hour, I outlined what had happened and what would happen next. I was honest about the company's financial situation, the hidden debt, the misappropriated pension funds, the years of mismanagement, but I also shared my vision for rebuilding, for turning Trident back into the company my grandfather had intended it to be. "I know this is overwhelming," I acknowledged as I concluded. "Change is never easy, especially when it comes as a surprise, but I promise you this: every decision I make will be with the long-term health of this company and the well-being of its employees as the top priority. Your jobs are secure, your pensions will be restored, and together, we'll build something better than before." The questions came fast and furious after that, some angry, some frightened, some cautiously hopeful. I answered each one directly, without evasion or corporate doublespeak. By the end of the session, I could sense a shift in the room, not universal acceptance, certainly, but a willingness to wait and see. As the employees filed out, a woman approached me, Sandra Mitchell, who had worked in the accounting department for 20 years. I'd gotten to know her during my time as Lisa. "I always wondered why an assistant asked so many questions about the quarterly reports," she said with a wry smile. "Now it makes sense." "I hope you don't feel betrayed," I replied, genuinely concerned. She shook her head. "Betrayed, no. You're the first executive who's actually bothered to learn my name in the past decade. I'm just trying to process it all. And I think maybe this company finally has a chance," she said. "That's worth something." Over the next few days, the story broke wide open. Financial news outlets ran headlines like, "Heir apparent Duvall daughter orchestrates stunning corporate coup," and "The secretary who owned the boardroom." Business channels sent reporters to camp outside Trident headquarters, hoping for comments from anyone involved. Nathan's arrest made national news, especially after federal prosecutors revealed the extent of his financial crimes. My father retreated to his estate in Connecticut, refusing all interview requests. The board members kept a low profile, their lawyers doing the talking for them. Meanwhile, I assembled a new executive team, a mix of trusted colleagues from Duvall Equity and promising leaders from within Trident. Victoria Chen became Chief Innovation Officer. Sandra Mitchell was promoted to head a new financial oversight committee. I brought in experts in corporate restructuring, employee relations, and sustainable business practices. The work was exhausting but exhilarating. For the first time, I was able to implement the ideas I'd had 7 years ago when I'd first tried to warn my father about Nathan's mismanagement. We established an employee profit-sharing program. We closed the tax loopholes Nathan had exploited. We restored the pension fund with interest, using capital from Duvall Equity to make up the shortfall. 1 month after the takeover, I made another symbolic change. I converted the executive corner office, the one Nathan had occupied, into a communal space for employees. The expensive artwork and antique furniture were sold at auction, with proceeds going to the Employee Emergency Fund. In their place came comfortable seating, collaborative workstations, and a sign on the door reading "The People's Corner." 6 weeks in, the federal investigation was in full swing. Nathan, facing overwhelming evidence and abandoned by his former allies, agreed to a plea deal. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided detailed information about everyone involved in his schemes, including several board members who had chosen not to sign my immunity agreements. The media coverage eventually shifted from sensationalism to analysis. Business schools began using the Trident takeover as a case study. Industry publications ran profiles examining my unusual approach. I declined most interview requests, preferring to let our results speak for themselves. 3 months after the takeover, Trident's stock, which had plummeted when trading resumed, began to recover as investors recognized the strength of our restructuring plan. By the 6-month mark, we had exceeded our projected recovery timeline, and employee morale surveys showed a marked improvement. It was around this time that my father finally reached out. His text message was brief. "Can we talk the house at 2 p.m. tomorrow?" The house meant my childhood home, the sprawling colonial where I'd grown up alongside Nathan, where family dinners had devolved into business strategy sessions. where I'd learned early on that my father valued ambition above all else. I arrived exactly at 2, parking my car in the circular driveway. The property looked immaculate as always, perfect landscaping, fresh paint, not a detail out of place. My father had always been obsessive about appearances. He answered the door himself rather than sending the housekeeper. He'd aged visibly in the months since the takeover, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. He wore casual clothes instead of his usual tailored suit, which somehow made him seem smaller. "Alyssa," he said, stepping back to let me in. "Thank you for coming." We sat in the sunroom overlooking the gardens, an awkward silence stretching between us. A silver tea service sat untouched on the table. "You're doing well," he said finally. "With Trident, the quarterly numbers are impressive." "We still have a long way to go," I replied. "But yes, we're making progress." He nodded, his fingers tapping restlessly against the arm of his chair. "Nathan took a plea deal." "I know. 8 years, minimum security. He could be out in 5 with good behavior." I said nothing. What was there to say? My brother had made his choices, and now he was facing the consequences. "I've been trying to understand," my father continued, "how I missed it, all those years, all that money. How did I not see what he was doing?" "You saw what you wanted to see," I said, not unkindly. "Nathan told you what you wanted to hear. And you told me what I needed to hear," he acknowledged, meeting my eyes for the first time. I didn't listen. I shrugged. "It's done now." "Is it?" he asked. "Because I keep thinking about that day in the boardroom. 7 years ago. You brought evidence then, too. I dismissed it without even looking at it. If I had just taken 5 minutes to really listen to you." "We can't change the past," I said, a phrase he'd used countless times throughout my childhood. A ghost of a smile crossed his face at hearing his own words echoed back to him. "No, we can't. But perhaps we can learn from it." He poured tea for both of us, his hands not quite steady. "I've been reading about your changes at Trident, the profit-sharing program, the pension restoration, the new parental leave policy, all the things you tried to propose 7 years ago. They were good ideas then, they're good ideas now." "Yes," he agreed. "They are, and the financial results are proving it." He paused, cradling his teacup. "Your grandfather would have approved. He always said take care of your people, and they'll take care of your business." I felt an unexpected surge of emotion at the mention of my grandfather, who had died when I was in college. He had been my first business mentor, the one who had encouraged my interest in the company from an early age. "I remember," I said softly. My father set down his cup. "I owe you an apology. Alyssa, many apologies. Actually, for not believing in you, for not protecting you from Nathan's schemes, for forcing you out of the company you should have helped lead." I'd imagined this moment many times over the years, my father finally acknowledging his mistakes. In my imagination, it had been triumphant, satisfying. In reality, it was just sad. "I appreciate that," I said, finding I meant it. "Can you forgive me?" he asked, his voice suddenly vulnerable in a way I'd never heard before. I considered the question carefully. "I don't need your forgiveness anymore. Dad, I don't need you to believe in me anymore. I just need you to understand why I did what I did." He nodded slowly. "I think I'm beginning to—" We talked for another hour about Trident, about my plans for the future, about Nathan, not as father and daughter seeking reconciliation, but as 2 people with a shared history trying to find a way forward. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest in a way our relationship had rarely been. As I prepared to leave, he walked me to the door. "Will you come back?" he asked. "Not right away, perhaps, but someday." "Maybe," I said, not wanting to make promises I might not keep. "Let's see how things go." He hesitated, then asked, "The company, do you plan to change the name from Trident back to Duval Industries, as it was in your grandfather's day?" I shook my head. "No. Trident has its own identity now, its own history, good and bad. I don't want to erase that. I just want to build something better on the foundation that remains." He seemed to understand. "You always were the wisest of us all." As I drove away, I felt neither triumph nor regret, but something quieter and more permanent, a sense of chapters closing and new ones beginning. 1 year to the day after the takeover, I stood again in the Trident boardroom. The table was the same, but the faces around it were different. My new board included experienced business leaders, employee representatives, and sustainability experts. The walls now displayed not the hunting prints my father had favored, but artwork created by employees' children and photographs of company volunteer initiatives. The annual report is ready for review, I announced, distributing digital tablets rather than the paper portfolios of the past. As you'll see, we've exceeded all recovery projections. Revenue is up 17%. Employee retention has improved by 23%. And our sustainability initiatives have reduced our carbon footprint by 30%. Victoria Chen, now my trusted second-in-command, smiled from across the table. Not bad for a year's work. We've just begun, I replied. Page 12 outlines our goals for the coming year. As the board members reviewed the report, I gazed out the windows at the city below. Somewhere out there, financial reporters were already writing articles about Trident's remarkable turnaround. The Wall Street Journal had recently dubbed me the mystery woman who made Wall Street bow, a headline that had amused my team to no end. Nathan remained in prison, my father in his self-imposed exile. The company moved forward without them, healing old wounds and creating new opportunities. And I had finally stepped fully into the role I'd been preparing for all my life, not as the coffee girl, not as the overlooked daughter, but as the leader with the vision to see what others could not. The woman who had once been invisible now stood in the light, directing the future of the company her family had built. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about redemption for the company, for its employees, and perhaps, in some small way, for the family name that had once meant something more than profit margins and power plays. As the meeting proceeded, I caught my reflection in the window glass. Not Lisa Drew with her purposefully forgettable appearance, not even Alyssa Duvall, the vengeful daughter, but someone new, someone who had learned from both of those women and emerged stronger. The board discussion continued around me, but for a moment, I allowed myself to savor the journey that had brought me here, from the outside looking in to the inside leading forward. From the woman they'd dismissed to the woman they now followed. From the girl who brought coffee to the CEO who transformed a company. I smiled at my reflection, then turned back to the table. Let's get to work, I said. We have a future to build.